Welcome to the Total Soccer Show and our review of a game between the 16th and 17th best teams in the Premier League, which lived up to the billing of a game between the 16th and 17th best teams in the Premier League. Yes, Tottenham ended their 17-year wait for a trophy, beating Manchester United 1-0 in the Europa League Final, with Brennan Johnson apparently being awarded the goal that made the difference. Ange Postecoglou told us he always delivers a trophy in his second season, and he was right. Stick with us as we go into detail on this game and look what's next for both of these clubs. My name's Ryan Bailey. Joining me today, it's our shiny, happy fellow Taylor Rockwell. Hello, Taylor.
Hello, Ryan. Lovely to be here with you all. What a fun game this was, huh? No, not at all. A painful game that we all had to suffer through? Yep, that's about right. But congratulations to Tottenham, to Spurs fans. I would say the deserved winners. I think they played the better of the two games, though that's not really saying all that much because I agree with you, Ryan, at the end of the day. My main note for this one was this looks like a cup final between the 16th and 17th best teams in a league.
There we go. A very dignified response from you, Taylor, as a Manchester United fan.
The rage is there. It's
there.
Good.
I was boiling under. Good to hear. Excellent. Graham Ruthven, how are you? Do you have any rage boiling anywhere?
Oh, always. It's a day ending in Y. I think smiling Taylor, rageful smiling Taylor is slightly unnerving, actually.
It's the general from Death of Stalin. I'm smiling, but I'm very, very furious.
Yeah.
And with good cause, Joe Lowery. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hey, guys, I'm great. I'm just happy to be here. I was thinking about taking this show off. It's just been a busy stretch for me with my other stuff, my other thing. So I was thinking about skipping all this and just really maybe leaving for the whole summer and coming back sometime in the fall. I don't know. I decided not to just because I thought it'd be more useful for me to be here and like gel with the group. But, to each their own.
Very nice.
Indeed. Hard season for Joe there.
Yeah.
He needs to rest up along with him with Yunus Musa as well, the two of them together.
Guys, when I said bubble wrap theory, I didn't mean now. That's really what I'm saying.
I sense that Joe Lowery is crossing streams into a different news story here.
Nah,
Joe?
wouldn't be me. Certainly not. Couldn't do.
Okay.
Haven't heard Poch's presser yet, so I'm trying to hedge still.
I like Joe, 5 minutes into the episode, already being over the Manchester United talk and ready to move us on. That
Literally
feels
an
on brand
introduction.
and probably appropriate.
Well, perhaps Joe Lowery will have an appropriate forum to talk about whatever you're talking about there, which is pertaining to the USMNT, on our bonus feed. Patreon.com/Total Soccer Show is where you'll find our bonus content, including Joe going off on politics, maybe? We'll see. Also, a bonus video and access to our Discord server where all the cool kids are hanging out. That's patreon.com/Total Soccer Show. A please and a thank you. But for now, let's get right into the Europa League Final. Okay, Graham, you want to kick off here? Not a good game. I think it's fair to say I'd say it's pretty marginal, the result here. Pretty marginal win for Spurs. The United had their chances too. Højlund, of course, with that chance late on that was acrobatically cleared by Mickey van der Ven.
Yes.
It was a strange one for Big Ange and those who've watched his oeuvre develop at Tottenham, because he was kind of, doing something a little bit different, is it fair to say? Or he was showing that there is a plan B, I suppose. He was, getting the team to bunker down and protect a lead after being, getting a reputation for not doing that at all. So is this evolution? Is this what this is?
I mean, potentially this is the discussion with Ange Postecoglou, and because we don't talk normally about the Europa League on the show, we haven't had a chance to discuss this yet. But this wasn't the first time that we've seen this from Tottenham Hotspur, where they maybe leave Ange-ball at the door, they play a little bit more pragmatically, they play conservatively, they sit deep and they try and hit out on quick transition. In fact, Spurs have done this all the way through this tournament this season. They did it away to Eintracht Frankfurt very effectively when they needed to win that game. They did it away to Bodo Glimt in the semi-final, where they had a lead to protect, so it was maybe a little bit easier for them to do it in that game. But we have seen some form of evolution from Postecoglou. Now, whether that is him changing his ideas on a fundamental core level, or whether that is him reacting to the players that he didn't have for this specific game, where Spurs didn't have Dejan Kulusevski was out injured, James Maddison was out injured in this game as well, and so I did a bit of a preview for this game, and I was struggling to work out what he would do in central midfield. I actually kind of speculated that Wilson Odegaard might start as the number 10 just to get a little bit of creativity into this team. But he went full on, what was this? Full on Mourinho ball, like peak Jose Mourinho ball, in a final where he has that midfield three of Bissouma, Bentancur and Sarr. And so maybe that meant this was the only way for Spurs to play in this game. But it worked. Like you say, Ryan, that it was a poor quality game. It certainly was a low quality game. The two teams had completed 96 passes between them after an hour of play. That was probably the most noticeable thing. It felt like neither team was able to get any passing rhythm going. It was scrappy. The game was breaking down every few seconds, I felt like, particularly in the first half. And some of that was down to the way Spurs wanted the game to be after taking the lead. I actually thought the first half was pretty open. Not a lot of final product, and obviously the goal itself was messy. I mean, it's a Luke Shaw own goal. I'm not entirely sure how Brennan Johnson has managed to snatch that one for himself. But it was played at a fast pace. It felt like both teams were trying to nick it in the press. It was just that Spurs were a lot more effective in their game plan, and we saw that game plan really come into itself, or come to the fore in the second half, where Spurs essentially sat deep, asked Manchester United to break them down, and they couldn't do it.
Ryan, sorry, I just have a clarifying question for Graham. I'm very confused. Are you saying that managers are allowed to make proactive and useful adjustments to style and approach based on talent available and opposition tactics? That's a thing you can do?
Yeah, it's quite the revelation, Taylor, and sometimes they can actually change the shape and the formation to suit the players that they have in their team. I know, quite the thing. So Postecoglou realised that in this game.
Someone should have told Amorim. I think this was a great result, and I do think for Manchester United, if they win, it maybe papers over the cracks a little bit, and it makes things seem better than they are. I don't think that's the case for Tottenham necessarily, because I don't think Big Ange was the all caps problem for the team this season. Like, obviously, he plays this game without James Maddison and Son Heung-min, who comes in as a sub, but is not clearly not at his best right now in terms of form or fitness. And yet he still gets this result. And I do think the results haven't been great in the league, but I wonder if you stick with him, if you give him some more players, if you just have the buy-in now that they've won something. Didn't really work for Erik ten Hag and Manchester United, but I guess I come away from this thinking, like, maybe he is right. Maybe he does win something in his second year. Maybe he did get more buy-in than I assumed he did, because I thought this was a beaten team going into this final, and they did not play that way. They didn't play great, I don't think. It wasn't the most aesthetically pleasing game. But even just the dark arts in the second half and how effective they were at frustrating and killing off the game and slowing down the tempo, I really don't think you can do that as effectively and consistently as they did without it sort of being a team-wide approach with a team-wide mentality and a manager that's helping kind of pull strings and make things happen. So it's a good result for Tottenham as a club, but I think it's a great result for Big Ange, even if it wasn't the prettiest of football on display.
Yeah, I totally agree, Taylor, in terms of the buy-in, and even things like the players holding up the flag at the end to the fans of the quote from Ange Postecoglou, which, by the way, is an all-timer of a quote, because when he said it, I remember we discussed it on the show, and I thought, I kind of wonder if he has... if he's just signed his own tombstone as Spurs manager there, where that's going to be hung over him for a long time to come. But
so this was him saying he always wins in his second season, and he said this in September, Graham, right?
When it did not look likely that Spurs were going to win anything. And look, we can debate the merits of whether this shows Spurs are actually moving in the right direction, whether them beating Karabag, Eintracht Frankfurt, Bodo Glimt, and the worst Manchester United team in history actually does show that they are a good team.
Second worst.
Oh, there we go. Okay, that's real success there. But
don't forget the 1973-74 relegation campaign.
How could I? How could I? Was that the one Dennis Law relegates Manchester United with a back heel? I think
yes,
that's the boy.
That is the one. But I was pleased that Spurs won this, because it felt like, for Manchester United, this would have been part of a process, right? It's all part of how do we improve next season? Does Champions League qualify and help us winning this game? Does it help us have a better season next year? For Spurs, it felt like, and just the sense I got from the fans in that stadium, they just wanted to win a trophy, and so there was an enjoyment from them that I didn't see from, like, Amorim looked super stressed throughout this game. Postecoglou was stressed in his pre-match conference, but I think he was a little bit calmer, and I just think having that clarity of knowing what they were aiming for maybe helped Spurs a little bit in a sort of intangible way.
I enjoyed some of those post-game scenes. You had Son crying and some, like, just great celebrations from guys who have been at the club for such a long time, like he has, and you could see that this really does mean a lot to them. Brennan Johnson was interviewed on the CBS broadcast of this game. Guillaume Balaguer interviewed him, and there was a question about, did you score the goal, right? Because it sure looked like it came off Luke Shaw when you watch it over and over and over again, and not off Brennan Johnson. Either way, Guillaume Balaguer asked Johnson, did you score it? And he was like, honestly, I don't care if I scored it, if the defender scored it, if the kit man scored it. Like, I'm just glad it went in. And I think that was true, right? I mean, you think about how much this seems to matter. I think Johnson said something to the effect of, this is a great club. Like, we have everything we need to succeed, which is not true. But they have everything that they need, and they wanted to give something back. And that was a cool moment from a game that was not a high-quality game. I know, Graham, you had tweeted out before, or blue skyed out before this game started, that sometimes bad football is the best football. I'm not sure if this one quite falls into that category or not, but what it means absolutely did. And that's a really cool thing. And a slightly difficult thing for my American soccer mind to comprehend is that all these teams are so moved by the Europa League, but still, it's something, and it gives you something to hold on to, and Tottenham very much needed that.
Okay. Joe, so I sort of led in saying this was a marginal result for Tottenham. I think it's probably fair to say, and there could have been a late Man United equaliser in this.
Totally.
The dying seconds were actually reasonably exciting, I thought, to be fair, of this contest. But do you agree that Spurs did more right than Manchester United did ultimately?
Given the constraints placed upon them, yes, I suppose. I think there was basically nothing between these teams in this game. Yes, Spurs just stopped attacking in the second half. Okay, let me back up. I'm so excited about this. Tottenham start the very first 15 minutes of this game and they're high pressing. They're going like basically man for man on Manchester United, at least their front three against Man U's back three. They would push the fullback up to the ball side wing back for Manchester United. They would slide. It was often Bentancur as Manchester United tried to build down their left. Bentancur would slide out to cover the near side winger, which was Mason Mount at times. They were pressing high, and Manchester United did not respond to that very well. Then they get the goal, right? And that changes things. And then the second half is Tottenham sitting very deep in either a 4-4-1-1 or a 4-2-3-1 block. And their attempts is doing a lot of heavy lifting. Their attempts at counterattacking were proper football, man, no nonsense. What I can only imagine is Scottish lower league clearances upfield to absolutely no one. Like, I haven't seen a team defend like this, maybe since the World Cup, where you just have nothing else to play for. You're not trying to mount any sort of attacking play whatsoever. It was hilarious, truly.
They went so early with that as well. It was
so
like
early.
75 minutes Spurs
Before
are basically... Even before that, it felt like Spurs were playing the last few minutes of the game. And I did think to myself, not only are they going to be able to make it until full time, what happens when Manchester United score? How do you then spring out into a different game state? So I did have my concerns there, Joe, certainly.
Absolutely. And that points back to Ryan asking, is this sort of a marginal result? And absolutely it is, right? Like, Tottenham, the thing that I can appreciate about Tottenham in this game, and I sense that we're going to have a deeper discussion about Ruben Amorim later on, and I have thoughts on that as well. Manchester United had two attackers who clearly made a difference on the bench that came on the field too late in this game, in my view. And it's easy to say about substitutes, right? Because they're going up against tired legs. They have seen the game, which means they can make decisions that are going to be more effective oftentimes. If you're coming in as a sub and you're not more effective than the player of roughly equal quality that you replaced, that's a bit of a problem. With that being said, this Manchester United team got nothing from their front three to start the game. They got nothing from Mason Mount, who was invisible. They got nothing from Højlund, who was also invisible. And they got nothing from Diallo, who was bad. He wasn't invisible, he was just bad in the attack. And they bring on Garnacho and Xerxes in the 71st minute, and all of a sudden Garnacho is actually breathing some life into a team. He's taking players on, he's making those kinds of changes. I look at Tottenham's bench from a Postecoglou perspective. I mean, Son is coming back from injury, and he is the sole game changer on this team's bench. When you think about an attacking sense, Matthijs Tel is on there as well. But Manchester United had options to go to, and Tottenham didn't really. And so for that reason, I'm inclined to give Tottenham a little bit more credit from this game, and the fact that they actually won. But there was nothing between these teams effectively.
Yeah, I think, broadly I agree with that, Joe. It was marginal in a broad sense. I think I'm maybe a little bit warmer on what Spurs did in this game, just because I think of the things that they did, whether it was as a team or as Ange Postecoglou as a manager, and basically everything went right for them and basically everything went wrong for Manchester United. So I look at the lineups, right? So there was a couple of surprises, or a few surprises between the two teams in the lineup. I was convinced we were going to see Son start after he started against Aston Villa at the weekend. Actually looked quite lively. It's Richarlison that starts on the left wing, and Richarlison was perfect for this game. He was excellent on both sides of the ball.
For this game.
No, well,
very key addition. No, I know.
This was the game they needed to win.
You're totally right.
Obviously, in an attacking sense, maybe not so brilliant. He didn't offer that much because Spurs didn't as a team. But defensively, his defensive work was excellent. Also, just breaking up the game, having that little bit of needle. Christian Romero had that as well. Spurs did that very well. I then look at the Manchester United lineup, which was even more surprising. No Garnacho. Taylor, you know my feelings on Alejandro Garnacho by now. I just think Manchester United, he's not perfect. He's very flawed as a player, but almost every time I watch Manchester United with and without Garnacho, they're a more threatening team with him on the pitch. So I don't really understand that. No Kobe Mainoo, so you don't have a two-way midfielder in the centre of the pitch, which was an issue for Manchester United repeatedly, where they have a system where they end up with a right-sided centre-back trying to feed a ball into the middle, and it's just a black hole. It's an abyss in the centre of the pitch. They don't have anyone who can get on the turn quickly. Mainoo is maybe the closest they have to that.
Graham, he got plenty of time. What are you talking about, Minor? that 90th minute substitution was going to be the difference. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, why would you need the guy who dug you out of the quarterfinal against Lyon with a really important goal in stoppage time? Anyway, so he's on the bench. Mason Mount is in a midfield too. That has never been Mason Mount's position. Luke Shaw is into the team as a back three. I don't think any of these decisions paid off. I thought Shaw was really shaky all game, as proven by the fact he scores an own goal. Didn't understand what Mount offered. They were too late with the changes. I mean, Xerxes comes off the bench for Højlund. I'm not exaggerating. Xerxes does more than 30 seconds than Højlund has done in the whole game, because there's a chance for Bruno Fernandes. It's one of the few chances that Man United have in the whole game. And the reason he's able to drift into that space is because of Xerxes' movement deep. Højlund, at this point, we spoke about this last week, Taylor. What is he? What is he doing in a team like he's offering nothing at all? And I have sympathy for starting him and it doesn't go well, but to make those changes in the 70th, 75th minute, when really I thought those changes need to be made at half-time for Garnacho and Xerxes to come on. I just have no sympathy for Manchester United. I thought Spurs, in the first half, they were better in the press. They had more in transition. Their goal, I know, is finished off scrappily. But it's a nice little sequence with Bentancur running in behind, setting it back to Sarr. It's a decent cross to the near post. Brennan Johnson he's normally the back post guy. This time he's the front post guy. He's excellent with his movement in the box, so he's in the right spot. He doesn't make a great connection with it, and it ends up in the back of the net. It was marginal. I'm maybe doing a lot of heavy lifting here with my case for Spurs, but they were the better team. They deserved to win this match. Man United deserved nothing.
The analogy I landed on when Joe first introduced the kind of like or agreed on the margin of victory is if you had like a cooking show. And Manchester United presented you with a single boiled chicken wing. And like Spurs, by contrast, also went with one single wing, but it was like at least cooked in the oven and had some salt on it. Like that is kind of what this was for me. Is it wasn't
at least it's edible.
Yeah, and I think Spurs with what they did with their defensive game plan with some of the pressing disrupted Manchester United more than Manchester United were capable of disrupting Spurs. They really kind of disrupted themselves more than they disrupted Spurs. And so I think the defensive game plan, the fact that led to shooting opportunities, led to creating chances basically, and led to Manchester United looking awkward and stilted and not really being able to play out. That was sort of the difference for me up until that goal is scored, and that at that point I think Spurs are able to be more defensive as they need to be, but also dark artsy as they need to be. And that's the point about Richarlison for me. He is a guy who I have like a lot of sympathy for. I feel like he gets much maligned. I think he gets mocked a lot, and I think probably has had some like mental health battles that he has had to overcome. And yet in this game, I detested him. I loathed him. He was so good at being the villain and just leaving a foot in and falling over, but then kicking a ball away as he stood back up. Like all the stuff you need to do to disrupt the other team and annoy them so that they're focused on fouling you and kicking you. Romero did the same. Harry Maguire just clears him out in the 90-plus minute and wastes another minute because he is frustrated. And I think Spurs did a good job in that way as well. So not the prettiest game from either team, but I think Spurs played the game better.
Yeah, I'm just not sure I'm there. And I'm sorry, I know we need to take a break. Tottenham didn't take a single shot after that goal hits the back of the net. They'd only taken 2 mediocre shots before that ball hits the back of the net. I feel like this is a case of, you can't really divorce these things. This is a case of that goal hitting the back of the net and changing how we think about this game. Mm-hmm. And that, I suppose, is how this sport works. But Graham, you're talking about that was a nice goal sequence. Was it? I mean, it's a nice bit of progression, I suppose, out of central midfield. Sarr ends up drifting wide, and we didn't see that sort of fluidity from Tottenham or really from either team in much of this game. But it's a hopeful cross into the box that gets bungled into the back of the net. Like, Tottenham did some things well defensively in this game, and I'm not trying to discredit the effort that they put in. There was a ton of effort on display. Did Tottenham play a good game? And I know that's not what you're arguing, Taylor, but I guess I look at this game, and to me it looks like there's 2 boiled chicken wings on the plate, and soccer is a weird sport sometimes. Yeah. And for some reason, soccer put a judge on the panel that likes boiled chicken wings, and that was enough to sway the tide towards Tottenham in this game. There was basically nothing between these teams. I think you play this game more times and Manchester United get a goal, and we're thinking about this game differently.
Joe, I hear you, and I hear the nuance there, and I hear the difference. I am a 40-year-old suburban father, so obviously I have to quote Sun Tzu. There is the line, never interrupt your opponent while he's in the middle of making a mistake, and I truly think that is what Spurs did better. That they basically were like, if Big Ange told me at halftime we're 1-0 up, we know they're not going to score, so we don't need to shoot anymore, and then that's how the game played out, I would think maybe he's a genius, but you could see the dysfunction in this Manchester United team. You could see the lack of cohesion, even on that goal, where Luke Shaw, as that ball is coming in, or before it's coming in, he turns to Jeremy Dorgu and twice says, mark him, mark Brennan Johnson. And then Dorgu doesn't get goal side, doesn't really track him, doesn't put him off his run. And that would be on him, except that then Luke Shaw kind of like bungles the ball off of himself and isn't really covering himself in glory either. But it's the moment afterward where he turns and looks at Dorgu, and you can see him start to get really angry, and Dorgu's just looking at him, and then they both just sigh and walk away. And there's just nothing. There's no response. There's no fight. There's no real connective tissue, it feels like, between those two and between a lot of the players in that team. And I think for Spurs, if your opponent is making mistakes and playing foolishly and not looking like they are capable of doing much, let them keep doing that?
I think that's it, Taylor. I think you've completely nailed it. This is from Opta. So Spurs had 3 shots, just 27% possession, and completed 115 passes tonight. This is obviously from last night. All the lowest figures Opta has on record by any team in a major European final. If you had told me last season that this is where Ange-ball would end up, I would not have believed you. I'm not sure I would have been in favour of this being the way that Tottenham have ended up playing. But they were playing this historically bad Manchester United team who have nothing in attack. Like, we saw that throughout the game. Man United's best chance was to throw Harry Maguire up front as the centre forward and just lump crosses in. The problem for them was that they couldn't get a good cross into the box. The number of times that Luke Shaw, who had a really bad game, Bruno Fernandes, I thought, had a really good game for as much as he is frequently Man United's one source of inspiration, just could not get passes going, couldn't get crosses into the box. So even that didn't work for Manchester United. Spurs didn't really have to do anything else. So that's why I think they kind of executed their game plan certainly better than Manchester United.
Let's take a quick break. When we come back, much more on this game and also looking at the paths ahead for each of these two teams. Exciting as that is. Join us then. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to our Europa League Final review. Taylor.
What?
Sorry, we're going to have to do it. We're going to have the conversation. So, Man United were bad.
Uh-huh.
Were you expecting them to be this bad?
Dude, that is
what
such a good question. That
Enjoy
swerved at the exact right moment. Okay, here is the thing that stings the most, and I will say this as a Manchester United fan. I will try to end with a happier note for Tottenham supporters. This is the first game in a while that I was truly, really excited for. Like, I made plans to have the kids covered so that I could actually watch live. It felt like an event for this Manchester United team for the season it has been, but for kind of all of the ups and downs of the past few years, the past decade, really. It was an exciting moment, and I never thought that this was going to be a 5-4 game. I never thought it was going to be a 4-3 game. I always thought it was going to be pretty ugly and pretty bad, and I was still supremely let down by the entire thing from start to finish. Not even just the tactics, not even just Ruben Amorim not making changes, and I would say not really getting his lineup right to begin with, but it really never felt like they were going to score. Even when there's the Højlund header cleared off the line, even when they have a few chances late, my money would have been on Tottenham break the other way and get a tap-in insurance second goal, more so than Manchester United ever making something happen. And I wanted to believe, I watched until the end, I hope something could be different. But it was just lackluster. It was just never that exciting, and it never felt like there was that heart there and that belief there. And they were the more dominant team in the second half. They had more of the ball. They tried to create more chances. They moved it a little bit better in the second half. But it still never reached the heights where it felt like, yeah, they lost, but they gave it their all. They worked as hard as they could. It just wasn't their day. And those games happen. This was a game in which I truly come away feeling like I have no answers at this point with this team. I don't know how they get better. I don't know how things change. Ratcliffe came in. Ineos came in. They've sacked everyone. They've spent more money, theoretically. Maybe there's more money to spend. They bring in Ruben Amorim, who's going to fix it all, and he wins. He won at least like one game, I'm pretty sure. So it just ends up feeling like, is this more of the same? Are they building towards something? Are they worse than they were? Are they going to be back in a relegation battle next season? It all sort of feels on the table, and that is decidedly not what you want after a cup final, to bring this monologue to a close and to end on a Spurs note. I will say the most shocking thing that I was not fully expecting to feel was after this one, when Spurs are celebrating, my immediate thought was like, okay, so it's 16th in the table. Like, that is what this season is now. It is no silverware, it is no cup wins, and you finished 16th in the table. You finish 16th in the table, you win the Europa League, you can explain it away. You finish 17th and you win the Europa League, you can definitely explain away that season. And I would give anything to have that. Like, yeah, they won. And at least they won some silverware, at least they won the Europa League. It feels, I assure Spurs supporters, like, it has to feel way, way better to have won that and finished 17th than it does to be a Manchester United supporter right now, still feeling like there are no answers to the increasingly large mountain of questions that are being asked.
And that's what made this game so tantalising, certainly for me as a neutral, was that this was a portal for both teams, a portal to potentially something better, but equally a portal to potentially something worse. And the reality for Manchester United is this is going to make Ruben Amorim's job harder, at least to put a better team on the pitch. He might argue, and he's kind of made this point in press conferences, which I thought was kind of a mistake for him to be quite so candid about this, but he doesn't seem gutted that Manchester United are not going to have Champions League football next season to clog up their schedule, which I think is sensible. But in the transfer market, this is undoubtedly going to make things harder for Manchester United. They have got players to get rid of, players to bring in. They've got to pay Adidas a £10 million punishment now for missing out on the Champions League for 2 seasons. They already have PSR concerns. I think they were £3 million above the threshold when they did have European football. They're now not going to have European football. I was reading that Omar Barada gave an interview a couple of months ago that said the second round of redundancies, which they've already announced for the summer, is dependent on whether Manchester United are in the Champions League or not. So I know we make jokes about it, but there are staff at that club who are going to lose their jobs on the back of this result. And then it just adds to the toxicity around this club. I actually think, and look, I've got a lot of conflicting thoughts on what this means for Spurs and for Postecoglou. I'm not entirely sure where I land with everything. But in the celebrations, you could see a lot of the toxicity and the negativity around that club just lifting. And that does matter for Spurs. For Manchester United, this is going to deepen the malaise around that club. How are you going to get buy-in in all areas of this club when that's the environment, that's the atmosphere at Old Trafford right now? This is going to make things harder for them, financially and also just intangibly.
And I think, Graham, like, that speaks to a level of frustration I am feeling that, like, when Barcelona pull levers and have to do ridiculous things to get themselves out of the financial hole that they dug themselves into, I criticize them and mock them and tease them. Like, if you switched the names of these clubs, there's a lot of that, like, kind of like Barcelona malfeasance to this Manchester United team, except this team doesn't win. And that is a huge difference. That Barcelona team might be chaos, but they're still winning. They are still entertaining. They have academy players coming through to pair with their smart signings and also their not so smart signings. But either way, if you're entertaining on the pitch and you're winning things, people will forgive a lot. When you are making similar blunders and similar PR gaffes and laying off your 14th round of tea ladies. I don't know why they have so many tea ladies, but they did. It across the board just looks like a team that doesn't know what they're doing. And when you occasionally win things, that can alleviate the situation. When you can have it be, okay, this coach got it wrong. Okay, that coach got it wrong. You can maybe explain it away, but at a certain point, it has to be deeper issues. And I truly don't know what those are other than ownership and directors and front office and coach and players.
So everything.
And that feels like pretty much everything. Yes. To end this monologue, the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series has like a torture device where you sit in it and it shows you where you are in relation to the rest of the known universe, just to show you like how insignificant you actually are in the grand scheme of things. And I feel like the torture device for Manchester United supporters would just be like thrust into that front office and just see the dysfunction and how deep that rot goes. And no, there's nothing you can do about it. You can't help. You can't change anything. It is what it is. But enjoy paying $250 for their preseason tour this summer. Should be great.
Yeah. You're all paying penance for the 90s and early 2000s, frankly, at this point, Taylor. Is that fair?
Well, okay, and that is a fair point, and a thing that I kept trying to remind myself of in the shed after this game when I was trying to calm down before I had to go parent my children, was that, you two would give anything, I'm assuming, to have your teams, your respective clubs, make a Europa League final. It is a lot to be complaining about a Premier League team who lost a cup final and how sad that is. I am aware of that, and so... it is worth keeping that in mind. It is worth celebrating Spurs supporters who haven't had a lot to cheer about, and it's worth, if you have Spurs supporters in your lives, pat them on the back, say good job, and then be angry, Manchester United supporters, because ultimately it's a game of football. It doesn't really matter, but as the old saying goes, of the things that don't matter, it matters the most. And so when it is this shambolic, it's a bit frustrating. Just a bit.
Yeah.
Just a bit.
I like the idea that you have a calming shed that you have to go into sort of...
I didn't know it was the comic shed at the time. I went in there to put stuff away before the rain came, and then found myself staring at the wall for 30 seconds. So there you go.
We call that pathetic fallacy in
What's in the common
literature.
shed?
The turtle.
Padded walls. The turtle. That's where the turtle lives.
Oh, more turtle chat. Excellent. Joe, to further quantify. To further quantify the importance of this win, Joe, for Tottenham, it's estimated it's worth £100 million in Champions League windfall for them. Obviously, they can waste that on players now. Man United can't, so that's a benefit for them. But Ange Postecoglou, after the game on the British broadcast, he said, us finishing third in the league wasn't going to change this football club. The only thing that was going to change this club is us winning something. So there is a sort of a tangible... there's more to this than just winning the Europa League final for this club who haven't had a trophy in 17 years. Do you think this is a real push-on moment, or could this just be all forgotten when we're 6 games into the Premier League season next season and it's a disaster?
I lean more towards that one, and I'm hesitant to say so in this moment that should be filled with joy. That's an odd statement from Postecoglou, because
he's been consistent on that. He said that for, I think, the last couple of seasons. He said the club needs to win something to prove that it can, essentially.
I mean, yeah, but now what, right? I mean, that's sort of the question coming out of all this. Is Tottenham all of a sudden magically going to compete for something domestically in the league? No, not really. Are they going to be a threat in the Champions League? No. I don't understand. I mean, I understand that psychologically there's value to winning stuff. Winning stuff is fun. We like to win more than we like to lose as human beings. I get that. But usually you hear managers preach process, right? Rather than results. You hear them go on and on about how there needs to be time. There needs to be these things that we're doing. There was an interview that I think Copa had done with Bodo Glimt, who had made that obviously deep run. And I only have seen little bits and pieces of this, so my apologies. But the story in that interview was that Bodo Glimt's manager hadn't said the word win the entire time that he'd been in charge of the team. That is obviously an extreme where you're focused on process to the point of not saying the word win or victory or whatever. But you do see managers err more on that side rather than, mate, all we need to do is win one game and then we're back. No, they're not. They're not back. There are still tons of problems that Tottenham have relative to the best teams in England. The problems are a little bit different than Manchester United because they're different clubs of different, sort of financial might, I suppose, although Manchester United certainly are not maybe what they used to be in that category. But I don't really think this fixes Tottenham. I don't think that this is a sign of their progress more than finishing third in the league would be. I think finishing third in the league would be a much larger sign of progress. But again, I'm not trying to just chop Tottenham fans down. It's fun to win stuff. And they were probably the better team in this game against Manchester United. And that's a fun thing to say that you were on May 21st, 2025.
Joe, the thing, of all the things you just said, the thing I agree with the most truly is it's fun to win stuff. And I think that's kind of what he means. There is, when your team is, I know this from youth level, so not trying to really compare, but when your team is winning a tournament and you feel like, oh, we've put it together, we have the kind of chemistry, we're rolling through teams, there is a vibe to that team. There is a vibe to winning. There is a vibe to pulling in the same direction, everybody fighting, getting away with one here, Richarlison antagonizing, and everybody kind of giving sneaky high fives afterwards. That level of togetherness, I think, isn't a thing that you can really coach. It's a thing that has to kind of happen theoretically, organically. And when it does, I think it's at the very least a thing you can point to later and be remember, this is what it feels like to win. Remember that feeling. That's what you've got to do. And if you don't ever have that feeling, or if you haven't had that feeling, you don't really have that basis, and so you're never maybe fully feeling like, is this it? Is this what it's supposed to look like? I think when you're in that flow state, you're in that flow state. And I think that's what maybe Spurs got to in their version of it, in this present iteration of it. But having that kind of sentiment, I think, to go back to, it gives you hope at the very least. And I think this win gives Spurs and their supporters and their players hope. It definitely does the opposite for Manchester United.
That feels a bit like my Aston Martin breaking down, and then the guy in the Nissan, you complain to them, you've never had an Aston Martin to break down. You don't know how this feels. Is there an element of that?
But I mean, there's something to this. So actually, what we have, there has been like a radicalisation of Postecoglou over the course of the last couple of years, and maybe that's the Spursiness of it all. But he used to be like the ultimate process guy. To Joe's point, remember that game against Chelsea where they went down to 9 men? He didn't change. He said, "This is the framework we're going to continue to use." And then over the course of the last 2 seasons, he has made more comments like the one that Joe mentioned there. Now, I trust Ange Postecoglou as a coach. I am not in that environment, and so this is where I find this difficult, where I think, well, maybe he has detected something within that club that needs to be washed away. And I hate that I'm going to use this example, but it's the best example that I can think of. Andy Murray, right, went so long without winning Grand Slam finals. He was in Wimbledon finals. He couldn't get over the line. And then he went and won the Olympic gold in 2012, which was at Wimbledon. And that's not the biggest title, but it proved to Andy Murray that he could win it. And all of a sudden, the floodgates opened and he went and won, Wimbledon the next year and the US Open a couple of months later. And he talks about that being like...
Wimbledon is the biggest title.
Wimbledon is the biggest title, but the Olympics are not, in tennis certainly. And that allowed him to go and win those titles. So, and he talks about that being like a key mental moment. Now, I'm not an elite athlete, so I don't have an insight into the mental side of things. Postecoglou probably does in that role. So that's where I do struggle a little bit, because he's put so much stock in winning a cup competition that they have essentially tanked the league. Like, I think Spurs finishing 17 as bad as they have been is probably a bit of a false position. Are they going to be up in the Champions League spots? No. Would they have been a little bit higher if they weren't prioritising not just this competition, but keep in mind they made it to the semi-finals of the Carabao Cup and they were resting players for that competition as well. They might have been a little bit higher in the Premier League table had that not been the case. But I don't know where I stand with Postecoglou, because I think politically it's going to be difficult to sack him now after you end the 17-year wait for a trophy. At the same time, his process has fallen by the wayside, and so I don't really know what kind of team we'll see next season if he stays in place.
Well, let's get to that in the next segment, Graham. But before we depart this segment, Taylor, I'd like to offer you a quantum of solace, and all Man United fans who watch this game and who've watched this season. The thing I firmly believe about soccer is that it's not the winning. The winning doesn't matter. I don't think winning matters at all when you follow a team. What matters is the community. What matters is that you had that moment watching that game where you blocked it off. It's literally the friends we made along the way. And this sounds trite, but it is. That's what I genuinely believe soccer is about. Soccer is about the engagement you have while you're watching it. It's about being in the bar with your friends watching it. It's about going to the stadium. It's about the cathartic experience that those Tottenham fans have had, whether they won or not. You've had the people who've made the trip to Bilbao. They've had a time, and that's what it's about. Really, it's about the time you've had. It's about those moments you've had. So it sounds a bit silly, but I genuinely don't believe soccer is about the winning for a fan.
Yeah. I think that is a lovely sentiment for Tottenham supporters to enjoy right now.
But it is about the winning for Tottenham and Man United's front office, who have to...
Yes, for them it's very much about
They're
that.
paid to win.
Financially, I suppose, yes, that's a good counter. Anyway, on that note, we'll take a quick break. When we come back, what's next for both managers? What's next for both teams? Let's get into it. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to our Europa League Final review. A list of things I enjoyed and thought were wonderful from this game. As we mentioned earlier, the sight of Sonny Heung-min crying at the end was wonderful. UEFA running out of medals for Tottenham, so I think it was Sonny and a couple of other players just didn't get a medal. They just walked on and sort of celebrated. That was
and one
weird.
of them was Son, the player who it was such a big deal was made of the fact he hadn't won anything for Tottenham and they didn't have a medal for him. Poor Son.
Yeah, James Maddison celebrating, and I think his exact quote on the broadcast was, "I didn't want to wear shin pads and be like John Terry," who was coming on to celebrate afterwards. That was fun. And who was it? Who was Was it? I think it was James Maddison who was on the CBS broadcast. We had Roy Keane in a rare CBS.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. Was Roy Keane on the CBS broadcast with Richards? And what was that like? That seems like a fish out of water.
It was a weird dynamic.
they were. It was the Roy Keane effect of if you're not used to being around. I mean, I'm not, but like watching broadcasts with him, if you're not used to him, it's like having a loose tiger on set. I think there was just much more of a like, don't set him off.
Everyone
don't
was
set him
nervous.
off. You could see. I forget the host's name. I apologize. I don't watch their Europa League coverage very often. So, but you could see her trying to throw to break every now and then, and just be, I'm just gonna let him go. I'm not even gonna step into this. And he was angry at the end, Graham, to answer your original question.
He was classic Roy Keane. And the moment that stood out to me the most, Taylor, I don't know if you saw him when James Maddison was interviewed pitchside by him. And it was kind of, there was a very needly moment where Roy Keane says words to the effect of, I think Maddison's fine, she's just not very consistent. And suddenly this is all banter. And Maddison's face just went, oh. He literally went, oh. Yeah. And he went dead face straight after that. It was like, this interview needs to end now. Because I've literally been insulted on live TV.
The context there is Roy Keane consistently in the overlap has gone after James Maddison and said he's not the kind of personality that he would want in his team. So I did see James Maddison, I think this was included in that interview, doing his celebration and saying, that's for you, Roy Keane, which I enjoyed very much, even though he didn't even play in the game. But nonetheless, he had his moment.
He had his John Terry moment indeed. Graham, I've got a question for you. Mm-hmm. And this is a serious question, which I think, let's say 5 years' time from now, who had the better season this season, Arsenal or Tottenham? Discuss, runs away.
Arsenal had the better season. Spurs.
Did they win anything?
Hold on. Spurs possibly had the more enjoyable season because they had that moment at the end. Arsenal, even though they're the better team that had better season, kind of quite angsty in the end for Arsenal. Whereas Spurs did have that release. So that's how I would define it.
That Real Madrid win has got to be the best moment of either team season. So, I mean, I suppose if you want to extend it to the next week and a half of the season, you could make a... No, you can't. Arsenal had the better season by a mile.
I think Spurs with the win probably had the higher high in that they won silverware.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
That is a significant positive.
So better?
But I think for Arsenal, Arsenal's biggest issue was the gap between us in first place is a little bit bigger than we want it to be. We're going to have to, that's sort of that's not the biggest problem compared to we are 17th in the table, and if we hadn't won this one, things are very, very bleak. I think overall the course of the season, it has probably been more fun to watch Arsenal games than it has been to be Spurs to
definitely.
Spurs games.
Yeah, for sure. Even this game wasn't fun for Spurs fans to watch. But as I say, it has that high, it has that release. It does. There is a little bit, though, Ryan, that makes me think, Has modern football ruined me and us in general? Where
yes,
sort of it is. I know I get what you're saying, Ryan, but also it is about winning stuff. And Spurs won a trophy. But I think if you're being level-headed and sensible about it, Arsenal still had the better season.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, Joe, question for you. Let's say you are Daniel Levy, and one
I
day
like this segment. This is good. Yeah.
There you go. You're Daniel Levy. What do you do? What do you do with Big Ange right now? Presuming he doesn't mic drop and walk away of his own volition in the next few days, which I suppose he might. What happens to Tottenham next season with Big Ange, even if they get, a bit more transfer kitty behind him? Is it still a bit of a disaster? Is there still not the foundations for this team to be successful?
Oh, I mean, if I'm Daniel Levy, I'm keeping Big Ange because I, as Joe Lowery / Daniel Levy, Joe Lowery in his body, love content. And I love Ange Postecoglou doing pressers in very bitey fashion. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm 100% not touching Ange Postecoglou. To be honest, I don't really know what to do with Ange Postecoglou. I don't think that this Tottenham team has made really any tactical progress under him. At the same time, the squad has been just decimated by injuries, right? I mean, we even hit on it in this game, but we've talked about it all season long. They're not themselves. And even when they are themselves, they're still not a great team, right? Relative to the best teams in Europe. So I think there is a world in which Postecoglou sticks around, and he's allowed to stick around, and Tottenham finish 8th in the table next season, and they make it to the knockout rounds of the Champions League past the group stage, phasing the phase, part 2, parentheses, the phase. I think there's a world in which that happens, and it's a really successful season for Tottenham because you're at a low. And one of the things that I believe in this sport, if you're looking for good PR, all you got to do is rebound a little bit from a low, and everybody loves you. I don't know how this is going to play out for Postecoglou, but I think if he sticks around, they will have a more successful, I don't rate the Europa League very highly from my perspective, but they will have a more successful season next year than they did this year. They'll be healthier. They'll likely strengthen a little bit in the summer window. And they're going to be a scarier team than they were this year. And I think that can happen with Postecoglou at the helm.
A question to which I do not know the answer, but do have a theory. Did any Spurs players obviously down tools? Were there any moments where it felt like Postecoglou had truly lost the locker room? Because I don't remember any really obvious ones. Maybe there was a little bit of rumored reporting here and there, but that also might be me not paying as close attention to Tottenham as I do some other teams. So
there were a
Manchester
couple
United.
moments. I remember mentioning it on the show. Was it the Wolves away game where they lost 4-2 in that one? There was a couple games where I thought, this feels like it's gone for Ange Postecoglou. But I think Joe's point about injuries is absolutely crucial. Sorry, Taylor, but Spurs were able to play this game in this final because they had their first choice back line back. And you look at that back line: Destiny Udogie, Mickey Van de Ven, who by the way,
great.
I think he's one of the best in his position. If I was Bayern Munich, if I were Manchester City, I would be spending a lot of money to try and get him out of Tottenham. He's fit. He missed half the season. Romero, who has his moments, I'm not as fully convinced about Christian Romero, but in terms of his fundamental technical ability is excellent as well. He had a great game. And then you have Pedro Porro with his crossing, which was dangerous at least in the first half. You've got Vicario back as well, who had a couple moments, particularly for the Hoyland header, but nonetheless, he's the first choice goalkeeper. Look at the difference it makes for Spurs, where they can play. They wouldn't have been able to play this way a few months ago because they had their entire starting lineup injured at a point. So I think that does need to be factored in when assessing Spurs' season as a whole.
I think it 1,000% should. I don't think they should sack him. And I think what I then run up against is the idea that, Manchester United won a cup last season and they stuck with that manager and it did not work out in the end. So there's an idea that just winning something does not mean that you are then on the right track. But I think the injuries point is a really valid one, and that's why I bring up that everybody still seemed bought in, that you didn't have anybody publicly, to my memory, publicly criticizing him, publicly attacking him. You had a squad show up and win a final. And I think a team that isn't committed, that isn't bought in, probably doesn't do that. And so those two factors added together, injuries constantly disrupting what he was trying to do, but the team still staying focused and winning silverware at the end. I think for me that is enough stability and enough positivity to stick with him for another season, especially when, as we've seen with the team they just beat, but many other clubs, there is not an obvious candidate out there who's going to come in and make them better and make them more of a kind of long-running institution. And so a person who has won something in his second season, in my opinion, is worth sticking with.
I don't know why. If I were Big Ange, I would stay at this point. I don't know why I wouldn't mic drop, because he's delivered the one thing that Tottenham fans have wanted for, nearly 2 decades. He's admitted in the interviews that he's had the toughest 18 months of his career in this job as well.
But if you're doing a mic drop, that is he's not done with football, right? So he's going to then want another gig. And I still think even winning the Europa League, finishing 17th and having a lot of really bad to lackluster performances mixes a little bit. And so I think outside perception is he won silverware, but they were also really bad and it wasn't fun. I don't know if he's the guy we're bringing in. I don't think it puts him in as strong of a position for his next gig.
He doesn't get a higher platform in terms of size of club and budget than Spurs. If he does a mic drop.
It's a really interesting point though, Ryan, that I had not considered, but I think that is why I would say don't do that, Big Ange. Yeah, unless you want to go manage DC United, they could use some help.
I just think of it as the right time to walk away from the blackjack table. There's always a right time, right? So maybe.
Alternatively, you're playing with house money because you finished 17th, and the only way is up. Otherwise, you get relegated.
Yeah, this is true. This is true. Taylor, my final question for this episode is for you. Mm-hmm. There are reports this morning on Thursday, as we record, that Manchester United will get £100 million in transfer budget this summer. They're supporting Ruben Amorim, according to the reports I've read. Amorim in or Amorim out for you?
I honestly am not just trying to dodge the question. I would love to hear Graham's thoughts on that. I will give you my answer, but I think Graham, not trying to put this on you, Graham, but I think you were really positive about him, going back to his links with Liverpool, right? And I think some of that rubbed off on me, and some of it was my own enthusiasm. But I have been a trust the process person. He hasn't had a preseason. He's jumping in. He's trying to make players fit into the areas he needs. But to have not seen, I would say, any real reaction, there hasn't been that growth from game to game. And then maybe you could argue, well, they're focused on the Europa League. I didn't love that idea, but you could at least make it. Once you lose the Europa League final, you can't really use that anymore. And so then it just looks like a team that never really found their best form, never really had the buy-in you need. You had certain players on the day look good. I thought Harry Maguire didn't really hurt his stock. I thought Lenny Yoro was fine. I think some other people then were really anonymous. I think it was the most anonymous performance I remember from Bruno Fernandes, but I think a lot of that has to do with where he was asked to play. I think it's just, I come away from this one again thinking, I don't know if this team is better. I don't know if they like what Amorim is doing. I don't know if he has gotten a response from this team. They beat 7 teams in the Premier League this season. Spurs obviously was not one of them. They lost to Tottenham 4 times over the course of this campaign. This Tottenham team that finished 17th, it is a very disconcerting position to be in. For me, a Manchester United supporter, but I assume for other ones, because you want to believe he's a young manager, he's got ideas, you stick with him, it's going to be fine. There is, I would say, 0 evidence that things are getting better, at least on the pitch right now.
I think there is more evidence that things have got worse under Amorim since, which is amazing to say because obviously it was such a low bar under Ten Hag. And I never expected miracles from Amorim. My point when he came in was we shouldn't really judge him in the league because Man Utd's season was effectively over, and he was always going to use this time to figure out what he had within the squad. At the same time, the one thing that he has stayed consistent on is this shape, is this 3-4-3 shape with wing backs that is benefiting no one within that Manchester United team. And we spoke about this last week when we talked about Xabi Alonso, and I think either it was myself or one of you guys said, the best managers will adapt. They will adapt to, they might have a consistent set of principles that governs their approach, but in terms of formation and how they use players, they will adapt. Well, Ruben Amorim hasn't done that at all. To my eye, it looks like Manchester United are an attacking player down basically every time they play. And for what? They're not any better defensively for it. They have trouble with defenders jumping into midfield and then opposition attackers attacking the space in behind. That's a real weakness for them. They don't have great wing backs who make up for not having more natural wingers higher up the pitch. In fact, Manchester United do have natural wingers, Diallo and Garnacho, who are being sidelined, certainly in the case of Garnacho, not so much with Diallo, for these wing-backs that aren't offering a lot. The central midfield is an abyss in build-up because, as I said earlier, they don't have a two-way midfielder who can get on the turn easily. System means that the ball ends up with the right and left-sided centre-backs. They don't have a pass into midfield. It gets bogged down in that area. And I just, looking at the way Man United played yesterday, maybe I'm a bit of a tactical Luddite. You put that team in a 4-3-3 shape, obviously you can go to a back 5 out of possession. I know there's fluidity there, but in an attacking sense, in a broad sense, a 4-3-3 shape with high and wide wingers and a back 4, I think you've got a better chance of getting more out of this team. And maybe this is all part of his process. I don't see any process right now. If there is a process, it's not with this group of players. He's going to have to assemble an entirely different group of players. And then the question is whether you have enough faith in him to give him £300 million or whatever it's going to take to assemble that group of players. So I think they'll keep him because Man United have rifled through so many coaches in the last few years. There are clearly other issues with that club. I think that's probably the correct decision. But if you're asking me whether I'm Amorim in or out, I'm neither at the moment. I don't think he's done anything to suggest that he's the right man to turn this round.
There we go. Yay, what a note to finish on. Everything's going to be fine, Spurs and Man United fans. Don't worry about it. Everything's cool.
Yeah.
We move on.
I mean, I think the truly frustrating thing for me is just that it goes back to Ralf Rangnick when he's the interim manager, and he lays it all out. I don't think they've ever made public exactly what he said. The main takeaway from that one was this club needs open heart surgery. I think it needed a full clear out. I think he had a lot of thoughts about the staff, about the operations, about the facilities, and all of that was completely shelved, and he was sacked and then not allowed to communicate with the next coach who came in. And I just keep going back to that as a very clear moment in which the problems were on display, were made very clear, and the people responsible for dealing with those problems, who were maybe part of the problems themselves, said, "Nah, you're fired. That's how we're going to handle this one." And I think the problems are going to persist. I think anything Manchester United wins is like lightning in a bottle or is getting lucky. I don't think that they have built anything that has me thinking that there is organic growth or an organic process to growth. So I expect more of the same. I would then ask you as a final one, guys, before we leave. I asked this in the Slack. When is it okay to stop voting with your wallet? Like, when is it okay to not pay? If you're an American who never gets to see Manchester United, but here they come to the country and they're playing in your city for the first time ever, like, I still get the idea of wanting to spend that money, of wanting to see them because they're a team you support, but you are then giving them a lot of money and continuing to give him your money. But then if you don't, there's a feeling of like, oh, well, what, now that they're bad, you don't want to support them? Now that they're bad, you won't go spend money on them? The people who live next door to the stadium still have to spend money. It gets really conflicted really quickly because I don't know how you keep watching a team that you know is going to be bad and isn't going to do anything about it, but expect different results. When you can't expect anything to be different, there is a feeling of like, why am I doing this if they themselves aren't doing anything differently?
Yeah, I mean, my top line on that, and look, I'm not any authority on this, but my top line is basically you support your team however you feel is valid. But I think you need some form of connection. So my team, Albion, at the moment, we are dreadful, probably the worst we've been in like 15 years at this point. But I still feel a connection to the club through like the people that I go to the games with. I guess that I grew up around Stirling, so like some sort of connection to the local community. So if you have something to connect with, then I would say maybe it's worth continuing. But if you don't, you shouldn't feel any guilt. Like you need to have something to cling on to.
What if that thing that I love is Bruno Fernandes, and I'm aware that they're going to sell him in the summer for £100 million?
When are you buying your Neom FC full kit? Is my question. Is my response to that?
That wasn't helpful.
Sorry.
Yeah, just switch your allegiance to Portland Bangers, as we all are on.
Problem solved.
And we're away. Yeah. I think, Taylor, my answer is very similar to Graham's, that you don't owe your club anything. As much as I love my club, the only way you can truly influence your team as a fan is financially. The only way, like when you see teams in the continent showing up for the first 15 minutes and protesting and going home, they still got your ticket money. Mm-hmm. The only way you can really protest is to not show up, is to not buy the jerseys, is to not do these things, and to make it as a risk of getting a bit heavy. If you're in an abusive relationship, you don't need to support it financially. You can cut it loose, and that might be too heavy of an analogy, but it's kind of similar in the fact that this is ultimately a form of entertainment that we are subscribing to here, right? So if it's no longer entertaining to you, don't feel obliged.
And I think where this comes from for me is like that is the thing that I think would turn even more heads. If Old Trafford isn't full because Manchester United is having a bad season or not playing well, or maybe they've got other games coming up, maybe it's not that big of a deal. Maybe it's like you can explain it away once or twice. If the big house, if like Michigan Stadium where Manchester United is playing Real Madrid is not full, or it's entirely Real Madrid and zero Manchester United supporters, or one of those preseason games has attendance under 50%, that is very internationally noteworthy that even Americans will not pay to watch Manchester United play at this point. Like, I think that does set a precedent. I think it does show that, like, the issue is way bigger than maybe that club wants to admit that it is. And I think that is a way that people could show their frustration. I worry that it's too hard to do so and too tempting to still go support that team, and I understand why people would want to, but it just, I think that's where I end up, is a feeling of like, it's not going to get better, so why would I expect it to get better? And I think maybe just enjoying players as I can, as listeners can, as supporters can, I think that's probably the way to do it, is watch them, enjoy the players that you can, and then switch off and don't spend time in the anger shed.
There you go. No more anger shed necessary. Calming shed, perhaps. Anger shed,
go.
no. If you just become a Premier League fan like I am and just support Team Chaos every weekend, that's all I'm looking for. My team to thrive. And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. It's the luck of the draw. On that note, let's wrap up this.
For me.
Oh, that was like James Madison.
Why did he have to do that at the end? Anyway, I know you're hurting, Taylor, but really? Anyway.
I apologize.
Let's wrap this one up. Taylor Rockwell, besides that last comment, thank you very much indeed for your contributions to this podcast.
Thank you all for indulging me in a few different monologues. I greatly appreciate it.
Joe Lowery, your assistance here in analysing this game and all games is very much appreciated. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Ryan.
Graham Ruthven, pleasure as always, sir.
Thank you, Ryan Bailey, fellow Chaos FC fan. That's my scarf as well.
That's right. Chaos FC till we die. Listener, thank you very much indeed for joining us on this one. We'll be back on feed very shortly indeed. But for now, bye.